Hello, this is David of the Savage Experience with another installment of Film Grammar. Today we're going to be looking at the term auteur theory and its effect on film. Now, what does auteur theory mean? It is the idea that the director of the film is the author of it, that it is his or her vision, and that everybody involved in its production is helping him or her with their goal. Now, the auteur theory got started with a French magazine, and I do apologize to anyone who speaks French more fluently than me, called Cahiers du Cinéma, which produced two French film critics in particular who would become filmmakers in their own right. Francois Truffaut with Jules and Jim being a good example, also the 400 Blows, and Jean-Luc Godard with Breathless. These two would be a part of the French New Wave, which I'll get into in a future installment. Now, what happened was when they were looking at past filmmakers such as Alfred Hitchcock, Howard Hawks, D.W. Griffith, John Ford being examples, that there was this not only stylistic approach that you could tell an Alfred Hitchcock film from a John Ford film, but there are also these themes that were prevalent in each filmmaker's work that you could tell which one was which. Now, I'll use some examples when it comes to the auteur theory. Like, first and foremost, visuals. And that is, you can tell, like, how Alfred Hitchcock directs a film and how Steven Spielberg directs a film, or, let's say, somebody like Christopher Nolan or Tim Burton, Ridley Scott. You walk into a film and you go, okay, I know what to expect. Or other ones like Quentin Tarantino or Woody Allen, like, you would expect not only certain visuals, but also when it comes to the dialogue itself. We'll get into screenwriters in a bit when it comes to their impact on the auteur theory. But so that's like the easiest way of going about it when it comes to the auteur theory, just by the visuals. Now, when it comes to themes of the film, of the auteur theory, that you can see that's a little bit more complicated in the sense that you've got to be more thoughtful about each film director. Like, for instance, when it comes to somebody like Steven Spielberg, that the most prevalent theme has to do with, fathers and their children, their relationships between them, and he pretty much explores almost every avenue. For example, like in Catch Me If You Can, where you have the child who adores his father, Leonardo DiCaprio and Christopher Walken. You have the father figure who wants to make certain that his children, not only everybody is safe, but his children in particular are safe. That's Jaws. You've got also in Jurassic Park the idea that there's a person, the main character hates kids. He doesn't like kids at all, but then he ends up caring for two kids as if they were his own, and then you got the final shot with Grant having the two kids, they're sleeping on one side and the other, and Laura Dern looks on him and he realizes that, yes, I have matured as a person, that I could probably be like a father down the line. Unfortunately, Jurassic Park 3 definitely ruined that relationship between the two, but riggedy beyond that. There's also the idea of the Coen brothers. You recognize them by their visuals, but also, let's take a look at, for example, Big Lebowski. When it comes to The Nihilist, then this is one of the most quotable films of recent memory. And when I think of The Nihilist, I think of "We want the money, Lebowski." Money. It's just, think about almost every Coen brother film has to deal with money, whether the money is a MacGuffin or that the money is just getting the plot started or money was taken. It's just, look at, films like Raising Arizona, where he keeps going back in jail, going back. Hyde keeps going to jail. Why? Because he needs money, because of that damn Reagan in the White House. I don't know, he seems like a nice guy, according to Hyde. And also with Fargo, where you have that great ending where Marge just sums up the entire film by going that this was all this chaos, murder, kidnapping was all over a little bit of money. Or Burn After Reading, they're wanting to blackmail Osborne Cox. Like, where's the money? Or Serious Man, once again, bribe to get a passing grade. Money. It's one of those where it isn't just that they work on with the Coen brothers. They also go into the idea of an existence of God, of religion, of fate for the Coens, but it's just one of the easier ones when it comes to the auteur theory. So when it comes to money, or Christopher Nolan, for example, with his films, that you look at them and you notice that there's always a character or so that has a tragic past, and either we're aware of it or we become aware of it as the film goes on. Like you watch Memento or his Batman films, or The Prestige and Insomnia or Inception, that there's something that has happened in this character's past. And it really had a great effect on him. A very tragic effect. So that's when it comes to the themes of the auteur theory. Now, we're going to talk about like the negative effects of it and also some of the people who blow it off. For example, I had a film professor who was a writer, and he hated the idea of the auteur theory. He figured that, well, I'm the writer, I am the author of the script. And that is true. And I could argue that the writer is also could be part of the auteur theory too, because I know that when, like, 3-time Academy Award winner Paddy Chayefsky won for Marty, The Hospital, and Network, that even though you had, Network was directed by Sidney Lumet, it would still be promoted not only as a Sidney Lumet film, but a Paddy Chayefsky penned script. So I would argue that the auteur theory can be applied towards screenwriters. But it also comes into the idea of a film being a collaborative effort. I mean, that's why people complain, why are the credits so long? Well, because they deserve to have their name there. There's so many people that work on films. You've got, when it comes to cinematography, film editing, visual effects, sound, makeup, the music, art direction, costume design, the actors, and of course the screenwriters, that everybody is involved in making a film. But ultimately it comes down to the idea that the director is the captain of the ship, and he's taking all of these elements together to make a picture. So it's one of those where if I was somebody, a part of the industry, I wouldn't be offended if Martin Scorsese was seen as like, this is his film, the auteur theory applies to him. I wouldn't necessarily be offended because I am helping with his vision. So another thing when it comes to the auteur theory, like a negative effect, is in particular when it comes to the 70s, and you had these group of young filmmakers that were starting to take over the Hollywood system and make the films they wanted to make. That you've got people like William Friedkin, Peter Bogdanovich, Roman Polanski, Robert Altman, Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas. You had all these filmmakers working there. And of course some of them ended up succeeding, either becoming legends or still working. Spielberg and Scorsese are the two best examples of those who survived that time period. But there were certain filmmakers, Peter Bogdanovich and William Friedkin I'll use as examples, that even though they did have influential films and also hits, that they ended up falling on real hard times. It's maybe not necessarily their fault, but I still think that they might have been focused on how am I going to impact the film as opposed to making a good movie. That you can definitely see that in how Bogdanovich and Friedkin conducted themselves in interviews and also producing their own pictures. That Peter Bogdanovich, for example, he had Last Picture Show, What's Up Doc, and Paper Moon hit after hit after hit. And then it took him a good 10 plus years until he had his next hit with Mask. And William Friedkin was the man who produced French Connection and The Exorcist. And then he followed it up with Sorcerer, a remake of The Wages of Fear, which was an unfortunate flop. It's a good movie. Definitely recommend to see it. However, it didn't succeed at the box office at all. So there is that negative effect, that idea that filmmakers will become so presumptuous and so arrogant that they have to go in there and make it their own film as opposed to making a good film. Now, the other idea when it comes to the auteur theory has to do with the producers. And also when it comes to the studio system of particularly the 30s, the 40s, and 50s, where they would hire directors to make their films. Now I know that people like Howard Hawks and John Ford were used as examples. I mean, they would just produce film after film after film. I would argue that a producer is a part of the auteur theory. Prime example is David O. Selznick with Gone with the Wind. Even though Gone with the Wind has one credited director, Victor Fleming, there were at the very least 2 other directors, maybe 3, that worked on it. The 2 that I know of are George Cukor and Sam Wood. King Fedor, I think, was another filmmaker that I believe he did work on this as well, but those were the other 2, Wood and Cukor, that I'm aware of. And I would argue that they don't refer to Gone with the Wind as a Victor Fleming film. They were same thing for Wizard of Oz, which was also sole directorial credit goes to Victor Fleming. That is seen as the producer being the auteur, that this was David O. Selznick's baby, that he bought the rights to the film, that he decided to get everybody, the best in town, to work on that movie, and became a huge success, winning so many Academy Awards. Let's see, how many Academy Awards? 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, that ultimately it's spoken up as a Selznick picture and not a Victor Fleming film. So, in conclusion, when it comes to the auteur theory, that I do believe that it still has a place in film, that I don't think it's just some French crackpot idea to make films more elitist. If anything, I just find it as a way to analyze films and to go into the themes and what the filmmaker is trying to get across, the ideas, any debate that can be spoken about, discussed, anything at all. That I still think that the auteur theory is still good, and that I don't think it's a load of hogwash as my screenwriting professor thought it was. So, this concludes another installment of Film Grammar. This is David of the Savage Experience, signing out.